Probably my favorite thing to hear from my students was that we treat them like humans. For the 2 hours they're in the class I'm teaching, they don't feel like they're incarcerated anymore. They're just there to make music with their friends. And then seeing the reactions of their families come in, people crying in the audience of the beautiful songs they've written, seeing my students, like their kids watching, their father up on stage like he's a rock star.
Welcome to inTUNE, Stories of Connection Through Music. This is the podcast where we explore stories from educators, artists, and community leaders who are using music to break down barriers and build community. We'll look at how inclusion shows up in private studios, classrooms, in community programs, and even inside correctional facilities. And I'll share a few stories and strategies that might just shift the way you think about teaching and connection through music. Whether you're a teacher, a musician, a parent, or someone who simply believes in the power of music to bring people together, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Martiros, a music educator, consultant, and the founder of opporTUNEity, an organization that uses music to connect people across backgrounds, bridge divides, and open doors. And by the way, all of the music you'll hear in today's episode was written or produced by opporTUNEity students in our programs. Today I'm joined by Paul Boisvert, a former student of mine at Anna Maria College who I hired to work for opporTUNEity first as a student intern and then as a teaching artist. Our conversation explores what happens when classroom learning intersects with real-world engagement and how stepping into community-based work can shape identity, purpose, and professional direction. Paul's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in a syllabus, but in relationships. All right, Paul, let's dive in. Why don't you just tell us about you?
Yeah, so I'm currently a jazz musician studying at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, studying music theory. I went to UMass Amherst for my undergrad where I studied jazz guitar. I've done a lot of teaching with mostly kids, teaching guitar and piano, group classes, private lessons, all of that musicians have to do.
To get by, yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you take us back to your childhood? What role did music play in your early life?
Music was huge growing up. My mother was always infatuated with Rick Springfield, who's famous for the song Jesse's Girl. So then I sort of grew up with Rick and then always referring to him as like mom's friend. Music was always playing in my house. My father particularly, huge fan of the Rolling Stones. There's always classic rock. Billy Joel, Bon Jovi, all of these things were paramount in my childhood.
That sounds like the people that my mother exposed us to growing up as well. When did you start taking music lessons, or did you take music lessons?
Yeah, I actually didn't take any music lessons growing up. Music was, until college, a personal self-taught thing for me. I started playing guitar around 12 and 13, where I discovered the band Nirvana and quickly just adopted that as my personality, this idea of counterculture and punk rock. I was very smitten with that. I wanted to grow out my hair. So my musical journey started with just teaching myself every single Nirvana song until I got to college, where I received my first actual music teacher. Growing up in the time I did, music education moved to like a digital medium. So it was way more accessible than previous generations, where I could just pull up a YouTube video and have some guy play it for me very slowly and I can just watch. So it was pretty accessible growing up in the time I did.
What year were you born? How old are you?
I was born in 2000.
Okay.
I'm 25.
All right. So that makes sense. When did you realize that you might be interested in pursuing music seriously?
Near the tail end of my high school time, I knew college was around the corner and really had no idea what I wanted to do. All I knew is that I just loved playing music. That's all I cared about. And also, like I mentioned earlier, in the digital age, growing up with YouTube, there was so many music YouTubers basically talking about music theory, and that was extremely exciting for me. So I was hoping that going to music school would unlock some of these secrets for me. And then I was deeply interested in the idea of music helping people. My high school band director told me about the field of music therapy. And then the more I learned about it, I became super interested because music was pivotal in my life, like self-regulation, an outlet for me growing up. So then I was really excited by the prospect of utilizing music in some sort of therapeutic setting. So that brought me to Anna Maria College, where I initially studied music therapy. I didn't finish in that degree, but I still have great respect for the field.
What happened along the way? Where did you pivot to, and where did you end up?
Yeah, so at Anna Maria, my guitar professor, Dan Thomas, who also worked with opporTUNEity with me, he really introduced me to the world of jazz. And then I just found that extremely exciting. This idea of improvisation, everything is spontaneous. You build up this energy alongside people on stage. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of being a teenager and what drew me to punk rock. Just this like raw energy of music that you're all sharing with in one space. That was deeply powerful for me. I was obsessed with jazz. That's all I listened to. It's all I wanted to talk about, all I wanted to play. So that took me to UMass Amherst, where I finished my degree in jazz guitar performance.
I feel like it's so interesting when we start out at our pursuits in undergrad to see where things sort of unfold and the path that we follow along the way. Yours has certainly been filled with variety. The desire to play and to share seems to be something that has propelled you forward every step of the way.
Right.
So I was dean of Anna Maria when you started as a student there. I remember your very authentic audition. We brought you on board when we first started the program at the jail. You were one of the first interns, or if not the first intern, in our partnership at the Worcester County House of Correction back in 2019. But I remember feeling just so nervous about being responsible for sending undergraduate students inside of this setting that I really didn't know too much about, and admittedly had my own preconceptions that weren't always accurate. I wonder what you remember about those early days.
Right, yeah, that was a very interesting time. I remember being super excited about the program. And I didn't talk much about this at the time, but incarceration was something that I grew up with, members of my family, members of my community. So it was something that I was already pretty familiar with by my time in college. So I wasn't too nervous about going in because I've already been to facilities like growing up. It was very interesting being on a different side of it. Whereas before you just like visit one on one with somebody, but now you're going inside a different part of the facility and you're sort of in like a teacher role, and then you have a whole bunch of students. Everyone's nerves the first time going in. We had no idea what to expect. The program was still in its infancy, and we were just figuring it out as we went, and it was really exciting. It was a really electric time.
I didn't know that about you, Paul, that you had that personal history there. What did it feel like to be involved in something that didn't really have a blueprint? We were just getting started.
I was like only 18, so I was still young. And then just seeing my professors who I really admired, figuring it out as they went, I felt very lucky to be a part of it, especially because I was so young. It was amazing to see. And then for it to be such a success too, it was exhilarating. It was like lightning in a bottle.
That's awesome. When you first stepped into the jail as an intern, what surprised you?
What was really interesting to me was how open the students could be. So making music is an inherently vulnerable experience. Oftentimes we're singing, we're vocalizing too, and then there's nothing more personal to you than your own voice.
Right.
Asking these students to sing the songs they've written, not only come up with these words that are true to them, but also to vocally deliver them is asking a lot. But seeing all of our students work together, and then you hear their stories and you see parallels in their stories, and they have a sense of like brotherhood throughout. And then when people would share something difficult, just seeing the other students react with empathy towards them and just how open everyone was, that really surprised me.
I like to be able to call you the OG of opporTUNEity,
Yeah.
which is kind of what you became over time. But when you transferred to UMass, you insisted on continuing, which I really appreciated. You were traveling an hour and a half one way to be part of the class. You weren't getting paid nearly worth that. And I wonder what that was like.
I knew the program was something extremely unique. I really haven't heard of many programs like that, and I certainly had no idea how I would seek out a different one. So I knew that staying with the program was deeply important to me. It definitely filled me with a greater sense of responsibility because there's just so much that goes into these classes and how you have to carry yourself within the class, to dress up a certain way to gain access to the facility. So it made me way more confident in myself.
Do you miss us? You're down in North Carolina. You haven't worked with us in a year. Do you miss the work?
Yes, I do. It's something that I did for like 7 or 8 years. So it became a really important part of me and who I am. It became more than just like a school thing or a work thing. It became like a part of my identity was this work. So I do miss it a lot, yes.
Well, we miss you, Paul. At one point, we transitioned you from the role of an intern to a teaching artist. And I feel like that actually happened before you finished your work at UMass. And I wonder what that felt like going from an intern who was there to support what the teaching artists were doing to then becoming a teaching artist who had the responsibility of not just teaching the content, but setting the vision for the class.
Yeah, that was a very exciting moment for me because I had been working in this intern role for a long time, and then when the time came the step up, I guess, I was very excited for that opportunity. It was a bit nerve-wracking originally because the classes were long. I have to be the one facilitating these whole 2 hours. And then oftentimes our students were not in the best of moods, just given the environments. Every class you had to win them over again. But then I realized that they're just hungry students at the end of the day. They're there because they're really interested in what you have to say, and they have their own background with music, and they just want to go to someone who can tell them more about this music. So once I realized that they really want to learn, it became way easier of a transition.
So was there a moment when you like really settle into that and you were like, yeah, I'm not assisting anymore. I'm leading this class?
Yeah, there was one moment where between two students there was a disagreement, and then things sort of boiled over, and then that led to one student leaving the class. And then in that moment, there was sort of a vacuum in the room. I stood up and I explained to the other students in the class of the disagreements, and then we just kept moving forward in the class. So that was like the first moment I really spoke up in a class and had the attention of all of the students at one time. So I think that was an early moment where I realized the difference.
You really kind of took command. You had to, yeah. And I also remember you taking the initiative to overhaul the curriculum too.
I've spent many years watching the class get facilitated. And then oftentimes when you're teaching, you don't really get to see the full extent of the class because you're so focused on teaching. So then I was able to take notes about things that work, things that need some workshopping. I really had some solidified ideas about how to beef up the curriculum. And then so when it was my time to lead the classes, I took a lot of those ideas I noticed just sort of sitting in the sidelines and then integrated them into my own teaching.
It sounds like your years of an internship role really helped you transition to a point of just complete ownership over a professional role, right?
Yeah, having that early experience was paramount to my learning and to like who I am as a professional. It was sort of like workshopping in the field. Like a lot of things that I learned throughout my time with opporTUNEity won't be taught in your standard 4-year music curriculum. It was like student teaching for years. I got this hands-on training and I got to see classes get taught weekly. And then I was given a chance to take my own swing at it and then take a deep look at myself and understand what I'm doing, if it's working, if it's not working, and looking into myself and being honest with myself about the work I'm doing is extremely important to me to this day, to hold myself accountable for how I'm doing.
That's remarkable. In our last episode, I spoke with Mark Recor, who was a student of yours inside of the House of Correction. And in this interview, he spoke candidly about the positive impact the music program had on him, due in no small part to the approach of teaching artists. And I wonder if you can speak to what this was like from an instructional perspective, what it was like to create this type of atmosphere, the type that Mark had referenced.
Yeah, Mark was always an amazing student. And I was talking about students being hungry for knowledge. He was the personification of that. He just showed up. He was ready to work every single week. He really wanted to learn guitar, songwriting, everything. And listening to his podcast episode, I was so grateful to hear that. What I was aiming for, which is like this classroom of like feeling inclusive and feeling like we're all musicians in one space and we're just workshopping these songs. We could be anywhere. We happen to be in Worcester County Jail, but we could have been in a studio. We could have been in someone's garage. We could have been anywhere where we're just getting together and working on these songs as musicians. Maybe the harmonies aren't working correctly, maybe pushing this way or giving them some chord progression ideas, working more or less as equals toward the goal of creating music.
Besides Mark, how do you think the other students in the jail were impacted by the work of opporTUNEity?
Probably my favorite thing to hear from my students was that we treat them like humans. The best feedback I could get, where for the 2 hours they're in the class I'm teaching, they don't feel like they're incarcerated anymore. They're just there to make music with their friends. And then my students have often told me that it was a very refreshing atmosphere. They can just like lose track of time and just have a guitar and bang on it and play piano and make all these weird sounds and sing songs. And oftentimes they would make songs to try to make each other laugh. The classes oftentimes were a very comical experience, writing about just the realities of the everyday life that they share. They're just making humor out of it. It was deeply a human pursuit we were doing.
Yeah, I felt like you and Dan especially had a knack for bringing out those kind of humorous songs. When you left to pursue graduate work last year, the sheriff's office wanted to send you a thank you gift for all of the years of service.
Yeah, that was very kind. It was a thank you card that I was sent, like a personalized card signed by him, thanking me for everything I've done with the facility. It was great to have your work seen, especially from someone so high up in the facility, which really speaks to the power of opporTUNEity, the program, that had such an impact on him that he would send a card like that. I was very thankful for that.
I felt that too, because I mean, you technically weren't an employee of the jail, right? You were an employee of opporTUNEity, and so I mean, it obviously really meant something to him for him to go out of his way and thank you for the years that you brought them. Okay, so you also worked with our youth program very briefly, and I guess also for one semester you worked with the Songwriters Circle as we were just trying to get it launched.
Yeah, that one was a bit tricky because it was still very young. And it was a very interesting look into post incarceration. So I spent all these years talking with my students about, what they're going to do when they get out, like what their plans are, and then how they're going to miss having this instruction because we brought a team of these very qualified musicians. On the outside, people will pay me a decent amount of money for these lessons. So then it was very eye-opening seeing the aftermath of that. So I'm very grateful that we're starting a program that can allow them to continue this education on the outside of the facility. Might not be as accessible, whether it be money or frankly time. Time as a commodity is a huge aspect where on the inside they have all of this time to work on these projects, but then the second you leave, you are just put back into the same situation you were before. You have payments, you have bills, you have dependents, you have to work. Trying to branch out and to give them an avenue of the stress relief and this hobby they had while inside, I think is very important work. But again, because of just the everyday real life factors of it all, it's super hard to build a sense of community outside, which is something that is still growing.
We've been in it for about 2 years now, so we are growing our population, but it is definitely taking time. I think you also worked for Hampshire County.
Yes, I did. That was a very interesting experience because at that point, we were sort of more of a well oiled machine inside Worcester County. We figured out what we do and how we do it. Going to a different facility, it's not exactly a one-to-one ratio or a copy paste because every facility is different. They have different regulations, different populations. Figuring out how we work in a different facility was very interesting.
So, how did working inside the House of Correction shape the way you view incarcerated individuals?
Yeah, it definitely expanded my empathy, especially as I went to a lead teacher role. Oftentimes, like I said, the students would be having, very bad days, and that would reflect into the class. And then just being able to be patient and empathetic towards my students, I just understood that if anyone deserves a bad day, you do, and then trying to make the best out of every time. Because I knew in the end they'll be thankful. By the end of class, you win them back over, and then they're thankful. But sometimes the beginning, they could be pretty combative. So then just getting the tide switched every time. It was a lot of work, but trained in empathy and patience, very important skills to have.
Absolutely. And has that influenced how you interact with people outside of the facility, either in your teaching classrooms or private studios or other professional spaces or even just day-to-day life?
Oh, for sure. Every single day. In my head, I compare it to my work in the facility all the time. Like, all right, so if I could do 2 hours of this class full of like my incarcerated students who are in horrible moods, I think I can handle, this 30-minute meeting with like maybe a peer who I don't quite see eye to eye with.
Right. So, yeah, it was just a great precursor to graduate studies.
Right.
Are there moments from inside that still stay with you?
Yeah, I think overall it's just a sense of thankfulness where to this day I have not had students as thankful as my incarcerated students. So they
Mm.
were always so thankful. And sometimes they were in a bit of disbelief about like you came all the way here and then you have like these credentials and you're taking your time out on your Saturday to come talk to us. Like some guys just could not believe that, and
Mm.
they were just so deeply thankful. So many ends of classes ended with students coming up and shaking my hand and thanking me for my time. So many of them so thankful for having 2 hours where they have a way larger sense of autonomy. So many choices to be made in the class about where they want to go with the music, and that translates to autonomy. I let them make all these decisions in a situation where they aren't granted that often. So the sense of thankfulness is something that warms my heart every time I think about it.
I remember that too, the very first semester being just stunned by the level of gratitude that came from the participants for us being present in the program. It really kind of softens you in profound ways. And then what about particular songs? So if you think back on the 7 years that you worked for the program, what are some songs that kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, there's a couple I could think of. The first semester, there was one, Tears of a Clown.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yes, Travis. Him and I worked extremely well together. We sort of had like this dynamic in that class. He would always want me to work with him on all the songs, and then likewise because he's a very talented singer. So the Tears of a Clown is just like the perfect example of that. So it was also like reaffirming to me as a young musician, like wow, we made this great song. Having a hand in that was just wonderful. That was a big one. Another one was one of Mark's songs, working on it in class every time. Just like, I just want to spend all my time in class workshopping it and then adding in all these different parts because it was genuinely a great song and such a beautiful message too about how he can't wait to get out, see his wife, see his family. It was a beautifully written song. That one stands out to me to this day.
It's amazing how they become their own life force too. I think one of my favorite memories from class was watching you work with the tattoo song about Danielle.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that. So that was a really funny experience we had. We were working on songs in groups, And then the two students I was working with, I don't believe they were too familiar with each other because we had guys from multiple blocks in the facility. So sometimes these guys weren't as familiar with each other. And then we're workshopping these songs. The idea of tattoos came up. And then one of the students, he was talking about a tattoo he had of a woman named Danielle. And then the other student was like, hold on a second. And then he pulls up his sleeve to reveal Danielle tattooed on him as well. It was one of like, the craziest experiences. So then we had to throw in a line about that into the song. That was just one of the funniest experiences I've had.
Tattoos like good scars, so they stuck. Need to rip it through my arm with the foot. I like the pain, the burning so insane. It'll rip it through my arm with the foot.
Okay, so Paul, you eventually chose to pursue graduate studies in North Carolina, which you have already talked about, but what prompted you to make that decision, and what are you studying?
Yeah, so I am in my first year studying music theory. It just stems from me wanting to talk about music all day. Throughout my time in college, that's why I figured I loved the most was just talking about music, figuring out how it works, why it works, and also because the field is directly tied to education. So if you go down this career path, you're going to end up teaching music theory. It's sort of the end goal of it all. So that's what I plan to do is teach music theory. It's going very well, and a lot of my time and opportunity definitely plays a part in my everyday work now. Just the teachings of responsibility. The company of opporTUNEity put so much trust in me and allowing me to sort of grow as a young professional. I carry that with me to this day.
Do you think it played a role in helping you get admitted into graduate program?
Yeah, I mean, most of what I talked about in my grad school interviews was my time in this company. So most of my experience in music was in a super niche corner of teaching in correctional facilities, which definitely stands out.
In what ways did opporTUNEity influence your career trajectory?
I think it really reinforced for me how important it is to have music education, to have access to that. Teaching music it's a privilege, not a right. So it became clear to me how important teaching music is and having it as something in your life.
When you think about the arc of your career decades from now, how do you imagine that you will reflect on your time with opporTUNEity?
Extremely fondly. I still think I'll remember all of the students I've had. I mean, I haven't forgotten them now. Mostly, I would imagine the showcases. It's such a funny change of character for all the students where, like for some ways, these guys they can talk a sort of a big game throughout the time. And then when it comes time that they have to go in front of an audience, they become like nervous wrecks a lot of the time. So then working with them and consoling them about like, hey, this is something I've done a million times. I promise you it'll be fine. Things that I was told when I started performing and I was super anxious about it. And then seeing the reactions of their families come in, people crying in the audience of the beautiful songs they've written, seeing my students spend quality time with their kids, watching their father up on stage like he's a rock star. Because at that point, we're working with the students for like 12 weeks. And then now I get a chance to meet their families. And I've grown in a relationship with these students. We've gotten to know each other well because we spent so much time together. And then now I'm getting to meet their families. And then their families always thanking me. And then I get to hear like behind the scenes, like, oh yeah, he would get out of class and he would call me and tell me what he learned today, how exciting it was. Oh, I got to play guitar today. That'll stick with me for the rest of my life.
I'm remembering the first concert watching Superintendent Tuttle bring a 2-year-old up to stage to interact with his father for the first time in a long time. And that moment brought me to tears. It was like instant watershed. Like you just slapped in the face with the reality of the circumstances.
Yeah.
If you could speak to your younger self as a college intern walking into the jail for the first time, what would you say?
Good question. Probably shed the sense of music school elitism earlier. What's happening in those classes, that's real music happening. It's not like classical harmony and counterpoint and Schenker. It's none of those things. This is music as a verb happening. The creation of music right in front of you. This is how people make music and how people have made music for hundreds of years. If I could have appreciated that earlier on, it would have been more beneficial to my learning experiences.
And I love that statement, especially because earlier in the conversation, you were talking about how
Mhm.
you were motivated to go to school for music because you just love to play, right? And then you stumbled into opporTUNEity. Like you wanted to go to school for music therapy. You wanted to focus on younger kids, but then you started working inside the House of Correction, and it transitioned your role to really valuing education, and shedding that air of elitism is crucial. And I feel like that's a rite of passage for college undergrads. You just hit it sooner than others because of the nature of the role. If you were to have a conversation with college faculty and administrators about the value engagement programs like opporTUNEity have on preparing undergraduate students for either careers or even just their personal lives, what would you say?
These programs give your students extremely niche and unique experiences. And then that's what makes up the payroll of a musician these days. You need to juggle a million different things. So then these programs are honestly a better look into what the state of being a musician, like a professional musician, is these days. So the more experiences for undergraduate students to have in music, the better, because it's not the same as it was. Being a musician calls for very different skill sets in the modern age.
I think a lot of students don't see value in these kinds of programs because they just want to get into the practice room or the studio and hone in on their craft, right? And so, if you were having conversations with undergraduate students, what would you say to them about the value of pursuing programs like this early on in their careers?
I would say be as hungry as you can for every type of musical experience that's offered for you. When you're young, you think of your career going in a very specific way, modeled by people you've seen do these things. But chances are your career is not going to be exactly like someone else's career. So you may not know what you want to do. You need to go out into the world and take advantage of all these experiences to really understand what you want. And also, you learn a lot about yourself in this time. If you're working in programs like these, you learn a lot about yourself. And also, you have a community around you. Make music with that community. I know we have this mindset of lock yourself in the practice room 4 hours a day. There's people out there who want to hear you play. Go play. Go be part of the community and give back the music that you're doing. Why else would you spend your time working on this music? Use your skills and give back to the community. People are hungry for it.
What are the skills that you've developed that are really helping you be successful as a professional musician?
Yeah, it's being open to working in any situation that takes music. And then you need to have these interpersonal skills to work with these communities. And then we get all sources of income and pay from very different places. So then networking and getting to know people is extremely pivotal. Keeping in touch with people, constant communication with people, and then learning how to maneuver the internet and marketing yourself as a musician. It's vital in this day and age.
When you're ready to try to start a program in North Carolina, let me know. We'll pursue that.
Will do.
And the last question is just a point of reflection. In your opinion, what does music make possible in spaces where hope feels limited?
For lack of a better term, it gives the students or the incarcerated individuals a voice where they get to go into this room where they are safe to talk about experiences they've been through, experiences they're currently going through, how they're handling their situations. They get to go into this room of their like minded peers. And then they're not only is it safe for them to discuss these things, it's encouraged. And then they have to spend this time ruminating on these thoughts and getting it out in a very safe and comfortable environment. And then just giving them the chance to play around, to play with these instruments. It grants them this level of autonomy about all these choices they get to make in a situation where you're not allowed these choices by nature of where they are. You're suddenly put in a situation where they are in control of the music. I'm just there to help facilitate them in any way I can. But at the end of the day, it's their music. They get to make all the choices. And having a situation like that in an incarcerated environment is paramount. It's vital.
Yeah, so voice, safety, autonomy, and maybe also a little bit of therapy and healing. Okay, so Paul, thank you. It was really nice to connect with you again. I just want to thank you for your time and your insights, your service.
Okay, thank you.
Episode 4 with Paul Boisvert felt personal in a different way. Paul didn't come to this work as someone observing the justice system from outside. He had friends and family who were impacted by incarceration long before he ever stepped into a college classroom. So when he began working in correctional spaces as a student, he wasn't entering unfamiliar territory. There was context and empathy already forming. That matters. Paul talked about arriving at college intending to study music therapy. He was drawn to the healing side of music, but over time, he realized how much he loved performing and shifted into jazz performance. That pivot says a lot about identity. Sometimes we think we know exactly who we're going to be, and then experience reshapes the path. Becoming the first intern in the program ended up shaping his career more than any single class ever could. He spoke very honestly about how that experience changed him, and then again how it strengthened when he evolved into a teaching artist position where he became a leader. After facilitating sessions on correctional settings, where attention, trust, and credibility have to be earned, walking back into a college classroom felt different. He wasn't just a student absorbing information, he was someone who had applied it. This changed how he carried himself, both inside and outside of the classroom. He also talked about empathy, not as a buzzword, but as a skill that deepened. Listening to participants' stories, working with people navigating complex realities, and seeing beyond charges or labels expanded the way he understands people. That kind of empathy doesn't stay confined to one program. It follows you into every professional setting. Paul's story is a reminder that the impact of these programs isn't one-directional. Yes, participants benefit, but students are formed in the process. They become more grounded and aware. They become more confident and, ultimately, more human. He entered college with a love for music and a personal connection to the justice system. He left with strengthened confidence, deeper empathy, sharper interpersonal skills, and a clearer sense of who he was becoming professionally and musically. The transformation was palpable. Episode 4 isn't just about one intern's experience. It's about what happens when education moves beyond theory and into relationships, when identity is shaped in real time, when justice work is not something you study from a distance, but something you step into with humility. That's what being in tune really means. Each episode of inTUNE will include a segment called The Pulse, where I respond to real questions from teachers, parents, educational leaders, or community partners about inclusion and music. Paul's journey from college intern to teaching artist to graduate scholar reminds us that meaningful work compounds over time. If you're a student, musician, or emerging educator wondering how to build a trajectory like that, here are 10 suggestions for emerging teaching artists. 1. Say yes before you feel ready. Growth rarely begins with confidence. It begins with proximity. Take the internship, step into the room, do the work before you feel fully formed, and allow space to let it form you. 2. Let experience shape your questions. If you're headed toward graduate study, don't chase impressive topics. Chase honest ones. Chase the ones that feel authentic to you. Ask the following questions. What unsettled you? What moved you? What confused you? What lit you up? The answers to questions like these are often your research agenda waiting to happen. 3. Move from helper to leader with intention. There is a difference between assisting and leading. Watch how leaders you admire hold space. Notice tone, pacing, boundaries, even strategy. Observe their overall approach. Then practice stepping forward, even in small moments and always with humility. Which brings me to my next point. 4. Stay humble in the room. Whether you're in a jail classroom or a university seminar, remember this. You are there to facilitate voice, not dominate it. Authority without humility communicates arrogance and often closes doors, both professionally and within relationships. 5. Let people complicate your assumptions. If your work challenges your worldview, lean in. Don't slip into a defensive stance. Don't retreat to comfort. Take a breath and allow proximity to humanize what statistics cannot. 6. Translate skills across context. The skills you develop in community spaces, listening, adapting, de-escalating, affirming identity, are all transferable. They will make you a better scholar, colleague, and human. They may even make you a better musician. And they most certainly will add critical nuance to the resume you are building one step at a time. 7. Build depth, not just resume lines. One sustained commitment is more transformative than 5 surface-level experiences. Stay long enough to be changed, and always strive to leave any organization better than when you entered it. 8. Protect the why. As you move into advanced study or professional spaces, remember why you started. Impact work can become abstract in academia. Keep it relational and always hold on to your why. 9. Reflect in real time. Don't wait until the end of your career to ask what something meant. Journal regularly, debrief after each encounter, and take time to process your experiences. Reflection turns experience into wisdom when done with ritual and intention. 10. Play the long game. Your first internship is not your identity, it's your foundation. The trajectory unfolds slowly. The rooms you enter as a student may shape the rooms you lead decades later. Build experiences and relationships with the understanding that networking almost always advances you faster than if you attempt to go it alone. Your path doesn't have to be linear, it has to be intentional. So say yes to the work that stretches you and let it build you. As I mentioned earlier, all of the music from today's episode was written and produced by our opporTUNEity students. To learn more about each song featured in this episode, check out our show notes. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If this conversation resonated, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It really helps others find the show. You can also send me your questions or coaching topics at opportunitymusic.org/inTUNE, and I might feature them in a future episode. That's opporTUNEity music.org/inTUNE. Until next time, stay inspired, stay connected, and keep making music that brings people together.